Hi, I'm Scott Langdon, and this week on God and Autobiography, the podcast, Jerry returns with a very personal and heartfelt look at suffering, with his very latest offering in our series, From God to Jerry to You. The question of suffering and why a righteous God would even allow it has been at the heart of much debate and discussion about who God is and what God cares about for centuries. In this episode, Jerry takes suffering out of the theoretical and theological and brings it down to earth in a way that really hits home. His home. Abigail has been through much in recent weeks, and that means Jerry has too. And that also means God has been in the midst of it all. I hope you enjoy the episode.
The challenges we have in life are not matters of high theory. They're situational, so close you can touch them with your hands. Minutes before we were to speak at a theological school in Princeton, Abigail fell and broke her hip. The next day, she underwent surgery. As I wrote a friend, I have been overwhelmed since the May 2nd mishap. We had a second episode. After being released from the acute rehab, while at home doing exercises with helpers, Abigail was suddenly chilled and extremely weak. They measured her blood pressure, 60/40. I've never heard of one so low. There was another drama, which I will spare you, that delayed our calling 911, but when we did, they could barely believe that she was sitting up, able to talk to them. Had we not called them, she would now be dead. Arriving at the emergency room, doctors immediately put in 2 pints of blood and another pint a day or two later. They discovered that she was bleeding from a large ulcer, a hole in her stomach. They cauterized it. That didn't quite work, so they cauterized it again. She's now at home, has resumed the physical exercises expected to last for many weeks. For me, the impact has been as much emotional as being somewhat run ragged. When I fell in love, I was aware that I had a new vulnerability. I had in previous years learned to live alone. After a divorce, that can be a relief. But having found my true love, it would be infinitely harder to go back to life alone. That concern has taken the stuffing out of me. So I wrote my friend. In the hospital, Abigail asked the nurses, who were very good at explaining things, "Tell me, why do bad things happen to good people?" They smiled and shook their heads. Years ago, she had asked her friend, the Jewish philosopher Michael Wishegrod. His answer, "Our people are working on it and should have something ready for publication soon." At various points in my dialogues with God, the why of pain and suffering came up. I was given bits and pieces of a possible answer, but never anything that satisfied me. In my book, Radically Personal, I call it the unanswerable question. Of course, answers have been given by various great thinkers. Their answers are all top-down in terms of the basic structure of the world, conceived, for example, as the best of all possible worlds, or in terms of an unknowable divine plan. Pain is not real, some say. But God told me pain is as bad as the people who turn against God because of it say it is. No denial there. So why pain? Why suffering? Let's try looking at the question from the bottom up instead of top down. We can look at individual episodes and see how we can best understand them. When I ask in prayer, "Lord, does suffering have any purpose or meaning?" I was told, think about your own times of physical suffering In the hospital, for example, the shots, the clumsy aid, the itch, the nurse about urinating, those were full of growth. In the God book, I recall these events. Being shuffled into an ambulance, the sirens, intensive care, the surgery, the whole ordeal left me feeling fragile, as if I were made of spun glass. A sharp tap, and I would shatter. God comments, these moments were not empty suffering. They even had to do with leading you to me. How so, Lord? They focused your attention, which led you to open your heart fully, God told me, to Abigail, because you realized how precious this love was. And it led to your prayer to serve God. How do our recent troubles look in that light? They seem to have few redeeming features. However, Abigail reports that they led to an unexpected unmasking of her love for me. For both of us, finding true love was an overwhelming experience. And for her, it was almost more than her sensitive self could take in. She shielded herself from its impact. Living through these life-threatening events together has brought those deep feelings to the surface. She loves me, you might say, more than ever. As Abigail explains it, the fracture plus near-death encounter had to be suffered without cover-ups or evasions of any kind. The combined experiences were too dangerous for evasions. As a result, and it's the last thing I would have expected, they gave me no hiding place from joy. In fact, she reports, I am happier now than I was before all this happened. From my side, I have observed with deep admiration and respect Abigail's remarkable vitality, even in the worst moments, not so much a willful slogging as a light-hearted buoyancy. She's devoid of the spirits of resignation and self-pity. Instead, with remarkable self-discipline, she follows the demanding course of therapy that consumes her days. For me, as her husband and sometime caregiver, these virtues are of incalculable value. Abigail worries about being a burden to me, but that's the farthest thing from my heart. I am happy to share the experience with her. I knew from the first that sometimes one of us would need to take care of the other. In fact, oddly enough, the opportunity to be helpful is a blessing. It allows my love to be not just felt, but to be enacted. There's a theological analog to love in action. The world is full of tasks for which God needs our help. As Abigail says, God can't mail a letter. In fact, the heavy lifting of life is necessarily right here on earth, to be done by us. God doesn't write the script. We write it together. Abigail and I are writing our script together, hand in hand in a hazardous and resistant world. Would I prefer that she have unfallable and unbreakable limbs? Sure. But if we ask, has our suffering been meaningless? Well, no, that would be an overstatement. Do these elements of mutual discovery make the pain a net plus? Well, not in the sense that we would choose it, but it may well be that even difficult times add to the meaning and purpose of life in what might even be called a redemptive way.
Thank you for listening to God and Autobiography, the podcast. Subscribe for free today wherever you listen to your podcasts and hear a new episode every week. You can hear the complete dramatic adaptation of God and Autobiography as Told to a Philosopher by Jerry L. Martin by beginning with episode 1 of our podcast and listening through its conclusion with episode 44. You can read the original true story in the book from which this podcast is adapted, God and Autobiography as Told to a Philosopher, available now at Amazon.com and always at godandautobiography.com. Pick up your own copy today. If you have any questions about this or any other episode, please email us at questions@godandautobiography.com and experience the world from God's perspective, as it was told to a philosopher. This is Scott Langdon. I'll see you next time.